All right, welcome to week 4 college football, and we have got ourselves some conference matchups here, whether it be the SEC, the Pac-12. We're going to start it off with Ralph, who's going to talk about the game that is going to be on everybody's mind, because that's the way it has been, as Colorado will be taking on the Ducks of Oregon here on Saturday. And Ralph, how are you approaching what is sure to be the most watched game of the weekend?
Colorado State, the most watched college football game so far this season. Deion Sanders has turned it into a magical mystery show at Colorado, but now we'll see what they're really made of traveling to Oregon. The Ducks a 21-point favorite, a total of 70.5. Now, I will say this. I really didn't believe in Colorado after their TCU win. I really didn't believe them after their Nebraska win. I really don't believe in them now after the Colorado State game. In that game, they got outgained 499 to 418. They win that game by 8 points in double OT. But again, getting outgained by 81 points per game, and the number one stat you have to remember so far this year for the Buffs, plus 6 turnovers. That's an incredible start after 3 games. Oregon, well, what do we expect? Well, they're a good team. Dan Lanning in his second season. They're coming off a 10-3 record. They have Bo Nix, an experienced quarterback. What do? Let's see. Your average score so far this year, 58-16. But when they visited Texas Tech, much like when Colorado visited TCU, the defense was shockingly moved on. 456 yards they allowed to Texas Tech. 174 yards and 5.4 yards per carry. They only had a 16-yard edge. And oh yeah, by the way, they're plus 6 turnovers as well. So while I lean Oregon in this game, my statistical profile says I think there's great value in the over. This number 70.5. I make this number 81. This will be on my card as an actual client release. And what do I look at? We know that there's clock rule changes this year. The first downs, the clock doesn't stop until the last 2 minutes of the first half and the last 2 minutes of the game. So what do you look for? You look for a high-paced team. You look for teams that still like to throw the ball. So on an incomplete pass, it stops. On an out-of-bounds play, till it resets, it stops. So looking at Colorado and Oregon, Colorado is number 10 in plays per game this season. Oregon is number 37. The other thing to look at is the pass-run ratio. Colorado is number 6 as far as passes compared to runs are concerned. Oregon is number 20. Oregon has showed us Dan Lanning is not afraid to run up the score in the second half. We have to talk about the Travis Hunter injury for Colorado. Probably the biggest injury so far this year. I think he really could have had Heisman votes if he had stayed healthy. What he's done at wide receiver has been great, but I think what he's done at quarterback was more important. He was taking the best receiver playing man-to-man cover. Without him, I think Colorado's back end gets completely deleted. If you say, well, he was a great receiver, he's only caught 16 passes this year. Horn and Weaver had more receptions than him as well. So Colorado still has enough talent on wide receiver. I think Oregon does look to extend the score in this one. Over 70.5 to me is a bargain. I make the total 81, so my best bet for this show, and it will be a client release, over 70.5, Colorado and Oregon.
All right, Ralph, appreciate that. Let's head it over to Drew Martin bets. But before we go to the SEC with Drew Martin, do want to let you guys know, go ahead, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button if you enjoy game previews here in college football. Nobody has more than we do here at Wager Talk TV. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button, and you will be notified every time one of those games becomes available for you to check out. And Drew, you're checking out your boys, the Auburn Tigers, taking on the Texas A&M Aggies this weekend, a little SEC battle. Who are you leaning with in this one?
This is a series that has seen the road team actually perform really well, both straight up and against the spread. However, each of the last two games, in this series, the last 2 years, the home team has won, including Auburn knocking off Texas A&M. If you remember, Cadillac Williams was the head coach. Pretty raucous atmosphere there in Jordan-Hare. Looking for kind of that same for Texas A&M, being at home. First kind of big game. They're hosting Auburn here. And a couple trends going towards the War Eagles. First off, their new head coach, Hugh Freeze. They're 3-0 out the gate. And he's 28-11 against the spread as a dog the last 39 games. And this one surprised me. 14-5 against the spread versus SEC competition. We remember how well he did at Ole Miss, kind of punching up in class. So I think the market kind of maybe looking towards the sleeper Auburn team on the road, early kick. I'm not totally against it, but at the same time, and I'm an Auburn grad, I'm really looking to be on the dog here and root my team home. But what I always like to go back to recruiting rankings here. And Texas A&M has out-recruited Auburn the last 4 years. Pretty strong here. I think top to bottom of the roster, the Jimmies and Joes, they got a pretty good roster, pretty good talent top to bottom. So that's what's keeping me off it. I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of push Auburn around up front. Plus, it's Peyton Thorne's first road start in the SEC. I know he's kind of a veteran quarterback there at Michigan State. We'll see if he kind of has some nerves heading on the road for the first time in the Southeastern Conference. So overall, great game getting us going on Saturday. I lean with the dog, but couldn't get there, guys. That's my big game breakdown.
All right, Drew, appreciate that there. No Auburn bias, I see. Ravino, what is going on here, my man? You're going to head out west, and we're going to take a look here at UCLA and Utah. A little bit of a revenge spot here for the Utes at home against Chip Kelly and company. How are you approaching this one?
Status of Cam Rising. This thing has been up in the air every single week. It remains that way this week as well. If Rising is not ready to go, head coach Kyle Whittingham has said he's going to continue on with redshirt freshman Nate Johnson. Johnson came in relief of Bryson Barnes in first couple of games. Florida and Baylor played pretty well. Then he started last week against Weber State. In the Weber State game, he wasn't asked to do very much whatsoever. Utah had 52 running plays and only 21 passes in that contest against FCS competition. Probably tried to save a little for here. Thus far in the season, he's posted pretty solid numbers where passing is concerned. 22 of 32, 281. It's almost 69% completions with the TD and no picks. I think it's his dual threat ability that probably would concern UCLA's defense the most. He ran it 16 times last week for 71 yards. And on the season already, Nate Johnson has 33 carries, some breaking from the pocket, some designed, but still quite a few carries for a quarterback. So you can see that might have UCLA preparing for some sort of dual threat ability here in this game. And they've already been through Grayson McCall and Jalen Maiden of San Diego State. Neither one of those ran it really well against this UCLA defense. So it'll be an interesting matchup. If you take a look at the other quarterback here, again, week one, he took the nation, so to speak, by storm. And now we're here through 3 games, and freshman Dante Moore does look like the real deal. He had his first road start. I mean, my first consideration was he's going to be on the road in conference play. Will he have the jitters? San Diego State's not conference play, but going into San Diego State and playing that defense is not an easy task. He walked in there 17 of 27, 290 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions. He's averaging 12.1 yards per pass attempt, not per completion, per attempt. That's a crazy number for a quarterback. He's got 7 TDs passing on the season. 3 of those have already gone for 62 yards or better. So certainly there's big play explosiveness there. The UCLA offense, by the way, Ralph talked about a huge number this early in the season. I got one for you too. UCLA's offense in 3 games has already scored 10 touchdowns from outside the red zone. Now 5 were last week, but they did get 5 of those from outside the red zone against Coastal Carolina and San Diego State, 1 via the run, 4 via the pass. Explosiveness abounds for this team. Running back Carson Steele, the Ball State transfer, picking up right where he left off at Ball State. And you team him up with TJ Harden, and both of these guys are killing it right now. Steele, 6.4 yards per carry. against FBS competition. Harden, 7.8 yards per carry against FBS competition. To add to Steele's running ability, he's tied for second on the team in pass receptions. I go through all of this because Utah's defense has been terrific. And when you think of Utah, it's the first thing you think of. First thing that comes to mind is the perception of Kyle Whittingham's defense at home. But I'm not so sure here that defense has enough to stop this particular team. Did the home atmosphere in Utah in their season revenge opener against Florida with a Wisconsin transfer, Graham Mertz, in his first game in a Gators uniform, did that pose a real offensive threat to Utah? And then did playing Baylor on the road without Blake Shapen, who got hurt the week before, the number one quarterback for Baylor, Sawyer Robertson was making his first start. Did that pose a real threat to the Utah defense? I'm not sure, but I know UCLA will. Chip Kelly's offense is humming on all cylinders. UCLA is not totally road tested yet, but I think they're in real good shape here in this game, plus 4.5 points. I think it probably comes down to a field goal, if that. One thing to mention real quick about UCLA, and really they weren't noted for this until last year, their run defense has been tremendous, and they also get after the passer. And if you're Utah, you're probably going to look to establish run and protect your passer. UCLA might have advantages in both those areas. Like a lot of things about UCLA here, so I'm going to lean towards the Bruins here, plus 4.5. If Cam Rising plays, you probably stay on UCLA. The line's going to go up, and who knows what kind of form Cam Rising will be in off of that serious knee injury. So UCLA plus 4.5 here for the big game breakdown.
All right, Rob, great stuff as always. And before we get to the best bets here today, I do want to remind you guys, if you have any questions about these games they're talking about now, or any game for that matter on the card this weekend, simply go ahead, drop that question in the comment section below here. These guys are going to be monitoring the comment section all week long. So if you have a question, I promise you these guys will get you the answer there. Knowledge is power. It's also how you cash some tickets. And speaking of cashing tickets, we're going to head back and start again with our main man, the pen, Ralph Michaels, in the house. And Ralph, your best bet, off the beaten path here, but I like where you're heading. Talk to me here about this Liberty Flames team.
Yeah, it's not one of the marquee games, but I'll tell you what, it is marquee if you cash a ticket, and I think Liberty will just do that for us. Drew, I got to ask you, are they having parades down in Miami? FIU loses to La Tech, gains 182 yards. They beat Maine, and then they beat North Texas and Connecticut for 3 straight wins. So you know I had to go to the database, guys. Let's start off with the data from the database. Since 2014, only 15 teams have won back-to-back games as a dog and then been a home dog of 7 or more. Again, that's 10 seasons. Those teams, 3-12 ATS, 1-14 against the spread. A few more pieces of data that I shared on Bet On It today. If a team is off a win as a dog of 6 or more, and now they're at home, excluding favorites of 20 or more, so you could be a dog or a favorite up to minus 19, those teams only 40.5% against the spread. And if those teams are playing an opponent off a win, like FIU is, they have gone just 28 and 51 against the spread. That is 35.4%. Now, what FIU has done has been remarkable, but let's look at the logistics. Against Maine, they were a solid favorite. They got outgained by 73 yards. Against North Texas, they got outgained and allowed 548 yards. They went to UConn. They did have a 21-yard edge. You have a young quarterback at Jenkins completing 56%. And again, when you look at the body of work, it's not been good relative to the strength of schedule. Now, you could say the same thing about Liberty. I know Liberty's only played Bowling Green, only New Mexico State, and only Buffalo. But the stats match what they've done on the field. The average win by 18 points per game. They are plus 151 yards per game. They've allowed 2 sacks the last couple games. They are forcing turnovers. In fact, they're number 1 in the NCAA in forcing turnovers against a mistake-prone young quarterback. Am I worried about Liberty going on the road, especially in back-to-back weeks after they won at Buffalo? And I'm not. Why? Because you are running the ball for 240 yards per game. You are running the ball for 5.3 yards per carry. You are only allowing your quarterback to get sacked 4.1% of the time. You have won the turnover battle by at least 2 turnovers in each game. So if you don't make mistakes on offense, you force mistakes on defense, and you can run the ball, that sets you up perfectly to win on the road in college football. Again, they went to Buffalo, they win 55-27. Last year, they go to Southern Miss, they win the game outright. They go to Wake Forest, they lose by 1. They beat Old Dominion on the road. They beat UMass on the road. They beat Arkansas on the road. And then late in the season, they lose to UConn by 3 points in a game they had a 152-yard edge. It was a horrible loss. So this team knows how to win on the road. Maybe there's some added pressure with this being their first conference game after being an independent, but I don't think so. I think they show the CUSA that they belong in this conference. Jamie Chanwell in his first season has this offense humming, and I think they want to establish the winning attitude in this inaugural conference game. I am on Liberty minus 10.5. FIU gets exposed. A great job by Mike McIntyre getting 3 straight wins. That may be the last win they see all season.
All right, Ralph, appreciate that. We send it back to our good friend Drew Martin, who is also going to be hanging out in the SEC once again, as Kentucky will be taking on everybody's favorite to start the season, Vanderbilt, it seems like. So, Drew, Kentucky rolling right now. What do you think happens in this big SEC matchup?
All right, guys, maybe I'm a glutton for punishment because I've already lost on Vandy a couple times, but I'm going back to the well, and I think I have a couple good reasons why. First off, on the Kentucky side, they're the road team laying nearly 2 touchdowns. They played Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, and the Akron Zips. That's probably the easiest schedule in FBS college football year to date. So to say they're untested, I think is an understatement. And spot-wise, they have Florida on deck. So in my opinion, that's the biggest game of the year for Kentucky because it's vying for second place in the SEC East Division. They're both probably going to lose to Georgia, and they both kind of, I would slot them as the number 2 team on the East side. So their biggest game of the season next week, something of a look-ahead spot here going up against Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt beat them outright last year. Vanderbilt had a 26-game SEC losing streak, and they snapped it against Kentucky. Vanderbilt's also 9-3 against the spread, the last 12 against Kentucky, so they've kind of had the Wildcats' number. Vandy's the only 0-4 against the spread team left in college football. So I almost think like pricing-wise in the market, they've lost all of the games you've been betting on them. Now might actually be a good time to jump on, kind of buy low. Hey, it's called gambling for a reason. We might get our faces ripped off here with Kentucky running away with it. But I think there's something to Vanderbilt in catching the points here, guys, at home. Home dog is barking. Sprinkle a little bit on the money line. Vandy might knock off Kentucky twice in a row. So give me Vanderbilt, best bet, plus the just under 2 touchdowns. Let's go Commodores.
All right, Drew, appreciate that. And now we head back to Rob Vino for his best bet. And again, guys, just a quick reminder, hit that subscribe and like button if it is college football content you like, whether it be previews or other best bets and top 25 games. Just go ahead and hit that subscribe button, become part of the family here at Wager Talk TV. All right, Vino, talk to me about this Troy team. What a difference a year makes. They're going to be taking on Western Kentucky. How are you approaching this matchup?
We're going to look at this over 58.5 because this game, to me, appears to have the same look as last year's 34-27 contest. Mathematics tells me 34-27 is 61, which is greater than the 58.5 that we're asked to lay here, or asked to exceed here. The teams in that game had 470 and 415 total yards, respectively. In that game, of course, Troy knew that the pass was coming, and they still allowed 29 first downs, 406 passing yards, 39 of 57 as far as attempts and completions are concerned, 68.4% completion rate for WKU quarterback Autzen Reed last week in that game. They gave up all those first downs and all that passing yardage, despite the fact that they sacked Autzen Reed 5 times in that particular contest. So when you add all that together, Troy State knew it was coming. They couldn't stop it. Western Kentucky's extreme tempo and passing game was pretty proficient in that contest, led them to 27 points. For Troy, if you want to just add to that, the fact that they were a great pass rush team last year, this year it hasn't been as good. They're under first-year defensive coordinator Greg Gasparato. He was Louisville's linebacker and safeties coach last year, comes over here now. Same system, basically, couple of tweaks, but new play caller. And he'll face a new play caller on the Western Kentucky side, right? Drew Hollingshead, or a new OC at least. Drew Hollingshead, the new air raid disciple offensive coordinator. He worked the last 5 years under head coach Mike Leach before taking this job. 2 FBS games played so far by Troy against schools that are not particularly pass prolific. Kansas State and James Madison. And Troy's secondary has allowed 67.2% completions, which is important because WKU is a rhythm passing game. And if Autzen Reed is allowed to complete 67.2, much like he did last year when he completed 68.4, they're going to move the football and they're going to score. WKU may be in a little bit of a step down in class here as well. Not maybe, they are in a step down in class. I mean, you play Ohio State last week. Ohio State is a national title contender. The speed and athleticism on that team, even though Western Kentucky showed up just to get crushed and take their paycheck, it's different than what they'll see here versus Troy. So I like the matchup of WKU's passing game versus the Troy defense. And I don't know that Reed will get sacked 5 times this year, so it might turn out even better for him. But there's a big advantage on the other side, too. Troy State's rush offense against this Western Kentucky rush defense, it should have a field day. And in fact, Troy head coach John Sumrall has already stated that he's going to lean on the ground game a little bit heavier this week than he did at James Madison. Had a little bit of second guessing of himself, saying that maybe they came away from the run game too soon last week against James Madison because James Madison is such a good run defense. Western Kentucky's the exact opposite of a good run defense. So far this season, allowing 244 yards per game on the ground. You're going to look at Troy here, and their run-pass balance is going to shift towards the run, and they're going to lean on their star tailback, Kamani Vidal, who should have a huge day here. Just because you're going to run the football doesn't mean clock grinds and we play unders. In this instance, I think running the football with Troy's power running game against Western Kentucky's miserable front seven and run defense probably leads to a lot of chunk plays and maybe some big scoring touchdowns out of Vidal in this particular contest. Both matchups really work well here. Western Kentucky passing game versus the Troy pass defense and the Troy rushing game versus the Western Kentucky rush defense. What you can add to that is I think Troy's going to be able to balance things out. And they like to throw the football a little bit, and Gunnar Watson is a really good quarterback. When you can run the football, obviously it sets up things. There should be a lot of open receivers in this game for Troy. There should be a lot of wide open completions in this game for Troy. So you get a little bit of run-pass balance, and I think the scoreboard production is going to be huge in this contest. One last thing about Troy, although they're somewhat known as methodical, they're number 32 this year in the nation in seconds per play. They run a play as fast as UCF does right now. We know UCF is a very, very fast team, so they're not going to go at lightning speed here in this one. They're going to try and slow it down a little bit because you don't want to let Western Kentucky back on the field that quick. But they do operate well when they go semi-fast. They get a lot of possessions here. They get a lot of points here. Again, the step down in class for Western Kentucky helps. They only allowed 2 sacks against Ohio State last week. Don't think that'll be an issue here. I'll play this one up and over. It all seems to add up to over 58.5. So that's the best bet for this week. Western Kentucky versus Troy, or at Troy, over 58.5.
All right, well, there you go. 3 best bets, 3 big game previews. And again, we've got so much more here in week 4 of the college football season. And again, if you like the content, if you like college football previews and best bets, go ahead, click on that video on the screen right now, and you will get all of our top 25 previews and best bets across week 4 of the college football landscape. Best of luck with all your plays. We'll see you again tomorrow here on the College Football Kickoff Show.